welcome everybody to this webinar with Tomas Haake, hosted by Drum of Global. And so at the start, let's do the normal stuff. Please follow Meshuggah on Instagram and Facebook, and please follow Drum of Global at Drum of Global on Facebook and Instagram. All right. So now there are a lot of people that have already signed in, so I think we'll just cut straight to the chase. And I think today, we don't need to see any more Thomas videos because you could see it on YouTube.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course the musicality in Thomas's playing is undeniable. I think all your fans have said that, like, a million times. So and that's the amazing part. So today we're gonna be talking more about Thomas. I know lots of you have burning questions about even the whole band, but this webinar is gonna be much about Thomas and also about Drum of Global. So we will try our very best to answer any questions that you have, but we certainly can't answer everything. So we seek your understanding, and we're going to start right now. Okay.
All right. All right. First off, just want to say hi to everyone, and thanks for joining us on this, and thanks to Boone and Drum of Global for doing this. This is pretty cool. I don't really do these things very often, so I hope we can have some good Q&A here. Looking forward to it.
Thank you, Thomas. And yes, it is indeed rare to get Thomas on these drum events, right? And,
yeah.
I've been told by many people that you want to get Tomas Haake for this. Oh no. So I guess this year, when I emailed you, I was actually very happy and appreciative and surprised that you actually said yes to this. And so really thank you for that. And I think
you've been asking me, I think maybe 3 years now, and I felt like every year I keep telling, just ask me again next year and we'll see, we'll figure something out. And I've put you off a couple of years, I think. So I felt like it was about time to do this.
Yeah, and I hope more to come, not just this year.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So Thomas, actually, whatever's been written on Wikipedia about you, I think we all know that. Like, I saw the Wikipedia, like you injured, you had a back problem and you couldn't play properly with your right foot and things like that. I mean, I don't think we need to talk about that, but I think for me, it'd be quite interesting to know. I mean, you joined the band when you were 19 years old, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've been in the band for 30 years, right?
I know, man. It's crazy. It's mind-boggling to me too. 30 years, like, wow. Yeah.
But I think everybody and all you metalheads, I think you should know that everyone has a beginning. So Thomas, why don't you share with us, how did you grow up with music? Like what was it before joining Meshuggah in music?
Well, I grew up in a highly musical family, and we all you just had to play instruments. My dad is a guitar player, my mom is a piano player, and she was a piano teacher for years, and they're religious Christian family. I say they are. I'm not really that anymore, but that's how I grew up, so there was a lot of church, a lot of singing, a lot of playing instruments. And I used to play that cornetto, not the full-on trumpet, but like the short trumpet. For those who don't know that, I played that for years, and I was even in a big brass big brass band setting for a while. But up until I was maybe about 15, and then at that point, drumming was everything. That was all I cared about at that point, and so that really kind of changed everything. And I stopped playing other instruments, and I stopped kind of doing that whole thing, and just kind of focused on drums at that point. And me and Morten, one of the guitarists of the band, we met when we were so young. We were only 6 years old when we first started kind of hanging out, and so me and him, we've been like this, you know, throughout our lives pretty much. And with him was also the one, we were the ones that kind of got together and formed our first band. We called it Barophobia because we wanted it to sound kind of creepy. And that was also in the vein of metal, but we didn't have a vocalist, so it was more like kind of instrumental music. And around the time I was like 18, the first Meshuggah EP came out, and they were from a neighboring city, only about an hour away. So they were kind of the talk of the town up there, I heard through a guy that worked at a music store, at a drum store up in Umeå, where Meshuggah is from. I heard from him that they were looking for a new drummer. The old drummer left.
Yeah.
And he gave I gave him my phone number, my contact, and he got in touch with them, and we met up, and that's kind of how it, you know, played out. And that, like you said, that was when I was 19 years old then. So what happened was I kind of quit the band that me and Morten had together, because at that point in time they were looking for a drummer only. And at the time, Jens, our singer, he was also playing guitar, but the music was kind of taking a side turn, and it got more and more kind of complex, and he just felt like it was too hard for him to kind of do the double duty there and play guitar for some of the new songs while singing at the same time. It was a little bit too difficult. So he wanted to focus on just singing. So a couple of years after I joined Meshuggah, I suggested Morten, that I grew up with, because he was an avid, very good, you know, metal guitar player, if they would consider him joining, and that's what happened, you know. So that's a very short, small scale version of what happened in my childhood up until the point I kind of joined Meshuggah. Yeah.
And did you ever like take lessons or learn drums from somebody?
Yeah, I tried, man. It was weird, because it was one of those things with my parents, because I told you that like they were adamant we all play instruments, right? So my sister was playing the flute, I played the cornet, my brother played the guitar, and when I was like, no, I want to focus on, I want to just do drums. This is stupid. I want to do drums. Then one of their kind of the catches that they had for me was like, well, if you're going to do it, then you got to go to a teacher. You got to do it proper. Like, yeah. So it's pretty funny. One of the first teacher I had, Per Rudqvist, I remember his name still. He was pretty old at that point, probably in his 60s. And I came into this room the first time I had the first time I'm supposed to have a lesson. I come into this room, there's this huge drum set in the corner, and I'm stoked, like, whoa, I'm gonna get to play that huge drum kit. And then it's like, no, it's this kit. And it consisted of a hi-hat and a snare drum, right? Yeah. So the disappointment immediately. And then of course, trying to learn like drum notations and stuff. And I remember that the first lesson was a lesson in notes, because he would just hover over my shoulder, and I would do everything wrong, and he would just say, no, 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 that's wrong, no. And then he got so tired of me, so we didn't even do the full 45-minute lesson. After 30 minutes, he kind of called it quits, and then he talked about the younger drummer who was very sophisticated for his age, that he also had as a student there. And this guy, actually, Morgan Höglund, he's actually pretty, you see him on like Swedish TV, and he plays with idol bands sometimes and like big things. So he was definitely, you know, one of those kids that just kind of, he was meant to play drums, right? But for me, not being there at that age, it was a little like, oh man, he keeps talking about this guy who's so talented, and like, oh. So I only lasted with that for, I don't know, I think I tried maybe, I would say at the most 10 lessons, but I was not interested. I was just interest, and I was just eyeing that big drum set in the corner, you know, hoping he would let me play that someday. So I dropped out of that, and I tried a couple more times. You know, this first time would probably be when I was about 8 years old, and the next time my mom and dad were like, yeah, but you should try it again. I was probably about, like, I would say maybe 11 or something, and the last time I was probably about 13, but it never caught on for me. It was like, I just didn't have I don't know, I didn't have the focus or the determination at that age. Like some people do, you know, some people kind of have that in an early age, and they really know and they see kind of the path to what they want to do kind of clearly. But at that point I was like, yeah, drumming was cool, but you know, I like to ride my bike too and hang out with chicks and, you know, the regular stuff. So it wasn't all about drumming. So the focus was never there for me. So I still, to this day, I mean, I can figure out drum charts, but you got to give me time, and it's not going to be any kind of fast process. So I kind of suck at that still, you know.
Yeah. And so you pretty much learn on the job, like as you play, you improve. Like something.
Yeah, I just tried to emulate whatever the drummers that I grew up with, you know, and I played. I would play along to like Rush and Iron Maiden and stuff. Not the most difficult Rush stuff, like the simpler stuff. So I would kind of try to play along with that and Iron Maiden and some of those, like the British wave, whatever music I was listening to at the time, and that's kind of how I started kind of getting those skills and then at around like 14, I guess, when kind of the Bay Area thrash came out, then it was over, you know, with the double bass and everything. And that was at that point I got my first like double bass drum pedal. I remember still how it looked. The weird ones early on that had the left beater would go like this. Yeah. It wasn't a straight beater on the left side. It was a pearl pedal, I remember. So at that point, I started playing along to Metallica and stuff like that, and that's kind of how I learned, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay, so let's go to some questions from there were quite a few people that wrote in through our emails, so I'm gonna have those questions first. And like I said to everybody, we can't answer every question, so we are choosing the best questions that pertains to Thomas and to drumming. All right. So.
All right.
Okay. So Yogev Gabe from I think he's from USA, but I saw I just want to check his profile. I think he's from Israel. So his question is, you know, what do you guys hear in your monitors when it comes to the click track? Is it overlapping 4/4 quarter note pulse, or is it the individual grouping according to the specific song? If you get the 4/4 do you actually feel all the subgroups in relation to it, or does it vary?
Yeah, actually we do only 4/4. There's no kind of the groupings that are in the music is something that for us, I think it can be there initially, like when you're writing a song and when you're trying to figure the song out, like these whole chunks that kind of go over the bar line. But as you listen to the music and learn it and learn to play it, we definitely feel it all to a 4/4 pulse. So that would obviously be the click track as well for us live. So the groupings are just an underlying fact of the song. You know, it's not something that you follow like this grouping, and I'm repeating this grouping. So it's more like you feel these like 8 or 16 or 32 bars as the way they sound, you know, always even bars. So it's never really about whatever the underlying groupings, what kind of like time signature they might be, because we don't really care about it. You know, it's not really important other than that is a tool that we use in how we make our music. So at this point, pretty much everything that we do is over the bar line stuff, and it's very rarely just something that's actual, you know, just 4/4 where everything is playing either 4 or 8 or 16 bars or whatever, and then start over. It's pretty much all of it kind of over the bar line thing. So Yeah.
And the click track is what, just going 8 notes, like 1 and 2 and
Yeah,
3.
it kind of depends on the song, but
Yeah.
usually if you take a song like Bleed, for example, it's just like that's
Okay.
a little fast. I don't play it that fast. It's just like something like that. So that's that goes through the whole track, and that kind of goes for most of the tracks. But we do use, I would say, like 8 notes is the most common. We don't do like tick tock tock tock. I personally, I don't think I will ever perfect the skill of playing to a click track, and certainly this music is challenging to play to a click track. And I've never really been like really good at it. If I hear myself play without a click track and to a click track, I can hear that there's a little bit of tension in me. You know, you're constantly like a kind of adjusting. You know, so I'm sure a lot of the people are on here today that have played to click tracks know that that's how a lot of people feel about it. But you would think at this point, I've played to a click track live for about 10 years, and it's still difficult, man. But at the same time, at this point, it's also a tool that if you took it out, I would feel completely naked. It would feel like, oh, because it's kind of weird because we rehearse with the click track as well. So at this point, if you take it out, it's like you're missing a band member. Where's that cowbell guy that's always in our band? Where is he? You're like, so I guess to a certain degree, it comes to a point where you don't trust your own sense of time, maybe, because you're so used to leaning on this thing, you know. So it's challenging for sure, you know.
Yeah. So playing Meshuggah's kind of music, obviously, I think everybody needs to know the song very well, right? Because the click track has no indication in terms of parts, sections, and things like that. And playing over the bar line. I mean, if you wake up and you forgot the song, you know.
Yeah, I guess you got to rehearse it to a point where it's kind of muscle memory, you know. Yeah. You're just kind of in a sense going through the motions. I don't want to say like bland about whatever we're doing, and certainly on a good night you're not just going through the motion, then you're like really there and in it. But it gets to a certain point where some nights you're just kind of, your thoughts are just trailing off and you're thinking, oh, I want to go to that place and fish. I haven't been there in years now. And you kind of go to other things. Yeah. So yeah, I guess to a certain degree that maybe a little more since we started using click tracks, that you lean onto it that much that it gives you kind of a sense of security, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Night after night.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Another question. All right. This is interesting. From Paul Webster. He says, I would love it if you would speak a little about the way Meshuggah group their notes. It has been touched on, but not really delved into. Please allow me to challenge you here. All through music history, music has been written with bar lines that separate note groups, but with you guys, you insist it's all 4/4. So the entire fan base argues that it should be written in 4/4, rendering the piece of music far more complicated to look at on paper with all the linked notes. Will you just at least call it some sort of poly something, time over time music? Where do you guys get the idea to approach music like that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly how it started, you know. I mean, or there were some metal bands that did that pretty early on. One of the bands that for sure, Jens and Frederick of the band, by the time I joined the band, they had kind of already started going in this direction. And one of those bands that they loved at the time was Holy Moses from Germany. And they also did kind of a little bit of stuff like that. And even Metallica alone had some, where you're going over the bar line maybe once, but then you're cutting it short and you're starting over. So it's a very simplified version kind of, and we just kind of took it to lengths where you just kind of have that repetition going on and on, you know, kind of. And I mean, you can see it any way you want it. I don't like to like tell people you should hear our music like this or hear it like that. If you want to take a song like, let me try to make a good example here, like Do Not Look Down, which is a fairly straightforward song and maybe a little easier to hear than regular Meshuggah, than other Meshuggah stuff. Basically what you have is a 17/8 note pattern, which is dun 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 dun, but you just feel it like gong 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 dun gong dun 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 gong 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 gong. And once that kind of thing like sinks in with you, it's not really, I wouldn't necessarily say it's much harder than any other music, but of course it's easy to say that after years and years of kind of doing it, but you know, what I was trying to say is just like, it doesn't really matter if you try to like, if you scrutinize our music and maybe you're a musical genius, but you just don't accept that, you know, we see it like this or for some reason, and you want to, like, to you it's 15/8 notes, and then it's 11/8 notes, 11/11, and then back to 15, and then it's 17. Those are the patterns that you hear because those are the lengths of the riffs. That's fine if you want to hear our music like that, but like we touched on earlier, you and me, Boone, when we tried out this calling thing, because I'm such a newbie at this. What you try to do is just make it groove. I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's got a kind of groove, you know. And to me, there are certainly a number of bands that do these odd time signature kind of patterns, but to me, it's just, you lose a lot of flow if you go like if it's constantly like kind of chopped up and starting over. That can be cool for effect for me, but for as a music or a band that does kind of only that, for me it's hard for me to kind of take it on. We do put like effort into kind of making this like have that flow, even if the patterns themselves might be difficult or whatever. Yeah.
So I guess maybe I would use the word like the pulse is more important than the hits.
Yes, sir. A lot of times, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because I think the pulse is what gets people really moving.
That's what creates the tension. Yeah, that's the tension creator. Like, where do you have the pauses and how long are they? And that's kind of what creates tension in our music, for sure. Yeah.
I know. I meant the pulse, like PULSE, like the pulse of the music.
Oh, the pulse.
Yeah.
Oh, the pulse. But accidentally, you caught on to something that we talk about, like the pauses in between the notes. Like you have patterns, but then you hang on one, or you have an actual pause. Okay, I see what you mean.
Yeah. Okay. So tell everybody, if you can, like what have you been up to during this period of like no concerts and things like that?
Yeah, man. I mean, this has for sure been weird times, and we consider ourselves very lucky. We did get this summer canceled, obviously, like everyone else did, but we were fortunate enough that we played a lot last year, so we had we had money enough to keep us, you know, going for a good while. And also not just a matter of money, but also where you are in as far as timing. I know so many bands that are just like, this is absolutely, you know, terrifying, because they just made an album, or they just were starting a tour cycle, or they would just and all of a sudden you get that rug kind of swept from under your feet. And for us, we had stopped touring for Violent Sleep of Reason, and we had started already kind of writing new material. So for us, we were so lucky in this. But I mean, we also had to, for a period of time, for like 3-4 months, we didn't see each other at all. So it definitely took down the speed of our writing to maybe a fifth or a tenth of the speed we usually produce material. Me and Dick usually work together a lot here at this very computer I'm sitting at, and that's kind of how we write a lot of stuff. And all of a sudden he kind of started working from home. I still continued coming here, but I was the only one. And Jens has a kind of his own office in here, and he just took everything, like the desk and his whole sound system and everything, and brought that home. So he's been writing from home as well. And so it definitely, you know, it definitely made everything a little weird, you know. We've been fortunate. I think Morten, our guitarist, him and his family probably had COVID. His spouse for sure had it, so it's most likely they all had it. But the rest of us have been fortunate, and we haven't really had anything that we think was COVID. So we've been lucky so far, you know.
Yeah. So you've been writing new songs.
Yeah, exactly. And at this point, actually, me and Dick we work together again here now. But that's something we got to start questioning again now too, because now it's like this whole, I don't know if you want to call it the second wave or whatever, if it's still the first wave, but everything in Europe is trailing the wrong way right now, and for sure Sweden as well.
Yeah.
You know.
And so what are the plans for Meshuggah if, like, let's say COVID lifts in maybe March 2021? Like, what would Meshuggah be doing?
I mean, that's kind of around the time we're planning to record the next album, is in the spring of 2021, and hopefully a release in the fall of 2021. But at this rate, you really don't know, because what do you do, for example, say if there's no like working vaccine out within that period. There's really no changes as to how many people can gather at arenas, or not arenas, at clubs or whatever. If you still can't do that, do you still release the album at that point? Do you hold off? Like, we don't know, because this is obviously a first, and it's a first for our record label obviously as well. So there's really nowhere to turn for any kind of advice on this either. You just kind of, all right, well, I guess we'll see where we're at in the fall, and see if we're going to hold off releasing it, or if we're going to do it some other way, you know, just do song by song and just do everything like streaming and online. And I mean, I'm sure this is bound to change how a lot of things are done. Maybe even if the COVID goes away, well, it's never going to go away like that. But even if we have a perfect vaccine and everyone takes it, and no one's scared of COVID anymore, and the world kind of goes back to normal, I still think that there's going to be for sure a lingering kind of hesitance that will be there for a while when it comes to big gatherings and stuff like that. So so we'll see, and hopefully everything will go back to normal, if you want to call it that. But we'll see. We'll just have to wait and see.
So the lingering question here you see on the chat is, where is Frederick, and what is his status in the band? So
well, he's very.
Wait, before you answer that, I want to tell
All
everybody,
right.
it's not a question about Thomas, but because I know everybody's very curious, so we're asking Thomas now.
Yeah, no, that's understandable for sure. Frederick has always been a very, you know, important part of this band for sure, and he was the guy that started it, you know. So,
Yeah.
uh, I at this point, I mean, he built a studio. He spent like the last 2.5, 3 years building a studio. That's not far from here, actually. It's like a 10-minute car ride from here. We visit him sometimes. I saw him only a couple of weeks ago last time. We still have we have a good relationship, and I think at this point, I think we do miss him. We do miss each other, and we'll see. Nothing is like concrete at this point in time what we're going to do, like if he's coming back or how that's going to look or whatever. But there's nothing in our relationship to each other that would hamper that in any shape or form. We're still very good friends, and he felt he needed to do this thing, and he felt this for years and years, and at some point it was like, guys, I got to do this, and we have to let him do whatever he wants to do. So that's where we've been at. We've been very fortunate that we found Per Nilsson, Swedish guitar player, to play with us. Tremendous guitar player, and we really couldn't have gotten luckier than that. So he for sure you know, saved us in a sense for these last 3 years, I would say. But at this point, we're not sure. We don't know exactly where this is going, but we hope and think that we will, you know, be the main unit back together again at some point. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. All right. So that answers the question. Okay. Let's take another question. Okay, let's look at the chat. Oh, it's too rapid. Okay. Okay, this Frederick asks you, greetings from Norway. Thanks for being here. Here's a quick question. How would you personally say your drumming has changed during the years since you joined Meshuggah, and what aspects of drumming would you like to explore in the future?
I mean, for sure, my drumming has changed a lot. And the years since, I mean, when I started, I was really nowhere near the drummer, Niklas Lundgren, that had played in Meshuggah before me. He was at a higher level. So but there was not many, you know, double bass metal drummers around in Umeå and Örnsköldsvik, where we're from at that point in time. So I think to a certain degree, I was what they had to deal with. It's like, oh, I guess we got to go with this guy because there's no one better around. And initially, I struggled so much the first year in this band. They had really kind of taken things, you know, already kind of way more advanced than anything that I had played, and certainly like all the songs were filled with so much information, and so it took me a good year of rehearsal, and that we're talking about like insane rehearsals. Sometimes we would rehearse 10-15 hours straight without even eating, because you're just like 19 years old and you're just like so hungry for it, you know. You're just like, I don't care about food, let's play. So in a sense, I would say that the biggest change in my drumming was the first couple of years with the band, where I really had to kind of first step up and then I had to kind of, you know, try to go with whatever the evolution was of the band at that point. And so with that said, those first couple of years were really kind of where a lot of things happened with my drumming. then of course, I mean, our music kind of this over the bar line thing kind of for each album, it just kind of progressed. So it's hard to say whether it made me, it didn't make me necessarily a better drummer. It made me a different drummer. And to a certain degree, I would say maybe like just the ability to kind of memorize or just these long chunks, since we don't listen to the repetitions of the whatever the cycle, the odd cycles. It's more about like just remembering the like these big like 16 bars or 32 bars, or so to a certain degree maybe remembering stuff is more a thing more than my whatever might be a technical prowess or whatever you want to call it. I mean, certainly with the years you do get, you know, your technique gets better, and one thing that I'm happy about is that if you go back and look at videos of me playing with the band from like 92, 93, 94, I played so hard, and I used to hurt, like everything hurt everywhere, like joints, like wrists, elbows, fingers, hands, everything just kind of hurt. So that was kind of my approach to it back then. It's got to be brutal. It's got to be like, oh, you got to hit him, you know, you got to hit it. But then over time, it's like you realize, like, no, actually, you know what? The drums actually sound better if you tone it down a little bit. You don't have to choke the drums with every hit, you know. So you do learn, and you do kind of, I guess you kind of channel yourself into like more of something of a median, that's something a good median of what you're supposed to do. Because at this point too, you got to be able to play like an hour and a half, sometimes hour 45 minutes, which was never the case back then. You would only play like, you know, open for a band, you would play maybe, you know, 20, 30, 40 minutes. And for 30 minutes, of course, you can wail as much as you want and just go nuts, you know, but if you're doing an hour 45, then it's something else, and you got to learn to pace yourself. So there's so much to be said about techniques, and it's not necessarily just about what you can do with a paradiddle and 1 foot, you know, it's so much about things around it and how to keep yourself, you know, healthy and not hurting yourself, for examples, you know, and that the actual like kind of ergonomics of everything definitely came into play there when I hurt my back, or after I had surgery for my back. And I also had shoulder problems and stuff like that, because I was really reaching like far out to the sides to play, like, you know, the big crash that I ride a lot, it would be like really far off to my right. And that was the reason I also took out like 2 of the rack toms and just placed a center tom, so I could move all the cymbals kind of in from being so far out. So I kind of, whatever, if you sit on a drum chair and you kind of just go with your arms out to the sides, as soon as you start to feel like tension, you have to, like, you know, use force to go beyond that. As long as you can be relaxed, I don't think you should have anything like further out to the sides than that. It's at least nothing that you're going to be playing a lot, you know. So that was kind of the approach I took to it, and it definitely helped with shoulders and, you know, stuff like that, you know. So everything's kind of more focused forwards more than to the sides.
Yeah.
I digress. I completely like shot off in a different direction here, but yeah.
Yeah, but you mentioned something that's quite interesting, like, so that you said that you don't want to hit everything so hard that it sounds better when you don't like choke it and things like that, right? Mm-hmm. So does that mean that when you play, you're not hitting as hard as you did? Like,
no, not nearly, no.
And you don't use triggers and things like that, right?
I do use triggers for the kick drums.
Okay, you do use.
Yeah.
Okay. But the thing is that for the snare and toms, you don't have anything. Yeah,
no.
So it's just.
No, I mean, yeah, I mean, I still hit with a certain amount of force for sure. I'm not a light player by any means, but I also have very heavy sticks. I mean, if you know Vic Firth sticks, it's about the size of a rock stick. So it's heavier than a 2B, longer and heavier than a 2B. So the sticks does a lot of the work for me as well. So it's still going to be loud. I mean, most people, if they come into our rehearsal, they're like, how can you play so loud? They think, I think people see me as a loud playing drummer for sure, but
Yeah.
it's just not what it used to be. I don't use that kind of, I don't try to force it like I
Yeah.
used to. No.
Okay. Right. So how would you describe the current Tomas Haake sound? Like is there an ingredient to it? Like, you know, is how did you come up with that sound that you like after 30 years?
Yeah, I mean, there have been some points in time that were really, I think, crucial and really like kind of changed our approach to how a guitar riff can sound, and that was first in the early '90s, right when I joined the band. The 7-string came out, like with the Steve Vai 7-string guitar with an additional lower string, right? So all of a sudden, like all those like metal riffs you used to be able to, you did on a 6-string guitar, you just kind of transposed it down, and then you had a way heavier sounding thing. And then a few years later, we got into 8-string guitars with another additional lower string. And if for those that are familiar with the Nothing album, that was the first album where we had this newfound thing, 8-string guitars. Wow. And so we were just going nuts. And basically the guitars that the guys were playing on at the time, they were hand built like Swedish. They were basically prototypes because none of the big brands had anything like that out yet. So they were prototypes built by a Swedish guy, and they didn't really sound too good when you did like power chords on the lowest string. So that's one of the reasons why the Nothing album has a lot of single string stuff, you know, and very low stuff. And that was like kind of why that album is so infused with that, was because it was brand new to us. So every song that was written on that album had that like, oh, listen to this. Oh, that's low. That's low. So that kind of intrigued us a lot. So those things obviously had a big impact. Obviously not so much on the rhythmical aspect or whatever on the music, but it did change how we write guitar riffs. At this point, it's almost like in the last like album and for sure on the new one that we're writing now, we're actually kind of going back a little bit where you play kind of 7-string and even 6-string kind of songs. It doesn't all have to be like that low, because if everything's that low, you don't really appreciate it after a while. It's just like all of it is kind of very low tuning. So you got to change that up a little bit. But other than that, I mean, it's really hard to pinpoint what made us this band that we are today. Like what the changes actually were. I think for most bands, you just have this thing that it just happens with each new album. You're kind of changing a little bit because you got older, because what you listened to and what you watched and what you read, everything kind of has an impact on who you are as a person. And that's bound to somehow like come out and your music. If you're a progressive band, I mean, that I'm sure the AC/DC members changed as people all throughout their lives, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you want your music to change, because for some bands, that's the whole thing. Don't change. You just want to stay exactly the same. And I would think that some people would argue we've stayed the same also, because now they're just doing that weird stuff over the bar line thing, and they've always done that, and they haven't changed at all. So, and I can appreciate that too, because if you're not in that sphere, in that kind of thinking, or you play or appreciate that kind of music yourself, it would be really hard to see any particular evolution of our band, as we're still kind of doing what we set out to do and what we kind of started doing in the 90s.
Yeah. Okay. Just want to say to everybody that's contemplating on joining Drum Off Global, hopefully you want to ask Thomas some questions about that, and we'll take those questions as it comes up. Okay. If you want to join Drum Off Global, you want Thomas to hopefully see your video of your drum solo, you can type in some questions right now. Okay. Right. The next question I'd like to ask Thomas is, like, how did your relationship with Sonar drums begin?
My relationship with Sonar drums started way before Sonar drums knew anything about me. I think it actually started at the local drum store in Örnsköldsvik when I grew up, when I was probably about 12, 13, 14 years old. And there was this Sonar drum kit there that I was always in awe of, like just how brutal it looked. Like all the stands were so like heavy duty and everything was like, and the shells were really thick. And it was just like the tanks of drums. So that was my first kind of how I fell in love with the Sonar drums at first. Of course, they've changed as a company, as drum makers over the years. And this was kind of what some brands were doing there in the 80s. And I don't know, they just had something that attracted me to them looks wise. And just like when you lifted up a stand, it was like, whoa, it was something else other than the old Maxwin, stands that I had for my first kit, for sure. So that was kind of how I first got interested in them as a kid. But then actually, funny, the drummer that Niklas Lundgren, the drummer that left Meshuggah and that I kind of picked up the sticks for after, he sold his he had a Sonar phonic drum set with like 4 or 5 toms and 2 bass drums, and he sold that to a guy, and I bought him back from that guy. So the drum kit that had been in Meshuggah, I bought it back. And so it kind of, and I really loved it, man. I mean, the phonics, they were really like heavy beach shells. So they were also like square toms. They were all really deep. So they were not easy to tune, but if you got it right, they sounded really good, but they were definitely not easy to tune compared to how most drums are today. And I played those for a few years there early on in Meshuggah, and then when we started kind of getting a name, and I had some help from Swedish importers and got kind of like semi deals, where I paid maybe like 50% for a kit or something, and I played Pearl for a while, but I always kind of I don't know, Sonar had those lock things, they still do, where the screws couldn't unscrew basically. So especially like I told you, I was such a hard hitter those early years that with the other drum sets that I tried, that screws, even the bottom screws from the bottom head would drop out. And that was just really annoying. So I went to the importer at the time of Sonar drums, and I asked them if there was something they could do to kind of help me out. And they shot my name kind of down to Sonar, and they were like, oh yeah, sure. At that point, it was probably around right before Chaosphere. This would have been like 96 maybe, or something like that, 96, 97. And they, Sonar actually at that point gave me a really good deal. I paid maybe at cost, I would say. So I got this huge drum kit with all the stands and one of those super heavy duty bronze snare drums, 14x8, all that stuff. And I paid probably only what it cost them to manufacture it. And I've been with them since then. So it's probably coming up on 25 years soon or something like that. And I see no reason to change. Those drums work really well for me. And of course, it's not just about a product. It's about, the relationship with the people and all that. So, yeah.
Yeah. And how about Sabian cymbals? Like
Sabian cymbals, kind of same thing. Started around the same time. I really loved them. I loved Sabians even since I was a kid. I remember my first Sabian cymbal still. My dad had come home he traveled quite a lot and work. So he had been to New Zealand and Australia, and I think he was coming home in the summer, and it was like for my birthday or something, and he brought home a 16-inch Sabian crash, I remember, and I was like, oh, wow. Because I don't know, we didn't have money to spend on brand new cymbals when I was at that age, when I was like 11, 12 years old. So this was really quite something, I remember so much, you know, you would get a crack in a cymbal and I would cut it out, like try to make a smooth curve out of it, and it would crack again, and you would just, you know, you would just make that cymbal just became smaller and smaller and smaller and more weird looking, because there was no money to buy new ones. So that was a treat for sure. Yeah. I did play early on with Meshuggah. I played Paiste cymbals and Zildjians. Like I had a mix of stuff because I didn't have an endorsement at that time, you know. So I remember I had those, like the Paiste rude cymbals, like the greenish kind of looking cymbals. I was playing those for a good while, but they were so hard, like they're so rigid that you like, you know, once I started switching to softer cymbals, my wrist hurt less. So it was probably a good idea to switch from those. But I would say probably around the same time, once we kind of started getting the name out there along, like Destroyer Race Improved came out in 95 and getting KS Fair in 98. So right in that, like in those years, there was people were starting to pick up on us, and we started getting a little bit of airplay and stuff in the States as well. And that really helped us to kind of get any kind of endorsement deals. And I think the same goes for Ibanez with the guys. They've been with Ibanez forever too. And it was actually, again, the importers here in Sweden at that time were called MH. And they were kind of the ones that introduced me to that kind of gave Sabian my name, like you should check this guy out, and sent them the CDs and whatever and all that stuff. And so they were really helpful, you know, for me at that point in time. And so that Sabian would have been around the same years, and I never had any reason to look otherwise. I think they make fantastic cymbals, and they're definitely one of the best brands out there for sure.
Yeah. So do you at the level that you're playing, do you still even go out to a drum store?
I mean, not like I used to, you know. When I was a kid, it was like you go to the drum store just to be like, whoa, you know, that was kind of the reason you went to the drum store, just to look at them, to feel them, to maybe if they let you hit a drum or two. But of course, it's not like that anymore. But occasionally I do go to drum stores just for the odd little whatever it might be, and sometimes even though I have endorsements and stuff, and if it's just a little thing, if I need like a snare, you know, it's a snappy snare, I'm not gonna like be an asshole about it and go order it like and for someone to ship them, you know, overseas. If I just need the one, you know, I'll just go to the store and buy it. But yeah, there are fewer and fewer reasons actually to go to the drums. When I do, it's more just to kind of say hi to the guys, because it's usually kind of the same people that have been working those places. The few ones that we have are in Stockholm. It's kind of the same people working, so it's a little bit also just to kind of, you know, touch base and say, hey, how you doing? Stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. We take another question here. You need to get a drink, Thomas?
No, I'm fine, man. Yeah, I got plenty. I got plenty of saliva production. I just swallow that and I'm good.
Someone asked, is that a fruitic shampoo behind you?
Huh?
Someone asked, is that a fruitic shampoo behind you? It's like behind you at the table, there's a shampoo.
Working hands.
What's that?
It's just like kind of a lotion for really dry hands.
Okay.
So it keeps your hands from cracking and whatever, you know, so the skin doesn't crack. So it's just like kind of fatty lotion. Yeah. And it's not good for drinking. I've tried, so no good idea.
Okay, this is from Damien Aguila. He asks, I've been a drummer for a band for 3 years now, and I'm also a medical student. The bass player is my classmate. My question is, at the beginning, I'm sure you had a day job while you were playing. How did you manage your time in a way that your day job didn't interfere with your career as a musician?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good one. I mean, I did work. I worked as a carpenter, but not as a construction carpenter, but more in a shop. We kind of, you know, do like, we would do like maybe like hotel lobby interiors and kind of, you know, stuff like that. So I did work with that for the first like 4 or 5 years that I was in the band. But no homework. I'm sure being in medical school is going to take up way more of your time at night and stuff like that than a regular day job did. And we were all kind of working a little, you know, a few of the guys just kind of worked kind of odd jobs, I guess. We really hated working at this time because we were all like, we want to do this. We got to do this. So it was kind of hard. And I don't think once the music, I think for all of us, once that became the main goal and the main focus in life and what you kind of wanted to do, the whatever you were working to make money, it was just a necessary evil almost. Like you had to do it, obviously, because you know, you need some money. But apart from that, I wouldn't say that we really enjoyed working at that point. We tried our very best to work as little as possible outside of what we were doing as a band. So I'm sure quite different to be in medical school, though. I'm sure that's going to be a little bit tougher. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And okay, another question. Do you I mean, we have read in Wikipedia who are your favorite drummers, right? So would you like to name at least 3 drummers and talk a bit about them, how they have influenced your playing?
I mean, it's really kind of difficult. There's so many drummers that have influenced me. Some people like Neil Peart, of course. I did listen to a lot to Rush, especially in my teens and my 20s. Neil Peart was an amazing musician, and what they did is still like will always be kind of mind blowing to me, and how they were able to make this quirky music work, you know, and become a huge arena band with this particular style of music. But I wouldn't necessarily say that. I mean, I don't sound anything like Neil Peart. I don't play like him. I don't see like that he had a direct impact maybe on how I sound as a drummer. But he was definitely an eye opener for me. And he was kind of the one that made me understand that a singer doesn't necessarily have to be the lyricist in the band. And because Neil Peart was always the main kind of the lyrics writer for Rush. And that's kind of something I learned probably when I was around 16, something. I didn't know that about him prior to that. So maybe when I was like 16, 17, someone told me like, yeah, or I just noticed it on the albums, whatever, like, oh, he writes the lyrics. So that was kind of a mind opener to me that they did things different in that regard too. But I mean, as far as drummers that influenced me, had like a direct like impact or an influence on how I sound, it's really hard. I mean, one that I would mention that was started early on, and I still to this day absolutely love his playing. He has very tasteful fills and stuff like that. That's Vinny Appice. I mean, for him, for me, Rainbow, I guess, to a certain degree, but when Dio was and in Sabbath and kind of brought along Vinny Appice from Rainbow over to Black Sabbath, that was those years were really cool for me. I know that Black Sabbath purists probably hate me, but I love Black Sabbath with Dio more than I ever liked them with Ozzy Osbourne, which is kind of weird, I guess. But so he was an important drummer for me, and for sure, like. In my teens, once I started kind of playing double bass, Lars Ulrich, Charlie Benanti, those drummers were also very important to me. And again, not necessarily that I see myself sounding like them today or anything. It was such a mix of things. And then around the time that I joined the band, they listened to a lot of fusion jazz, like rock fusion. So you had drummers like Vina Colaiuta and you know, Dave Weckel, Vina Colaiuta, Steve Gadd, whatever, Terry Bozzio, you know, guys like that. And I think maybe equal parts maybe to some of those metal drummers that I grew up with. That kind of, you know, had an impact on my drumming for sure. And kind of how I really I was really intrigued with some of the, like, kind of how they would do fills and stuff like that was kind of a sidestep from the typical metal drumming for sure, you know, even though sometimes they kind of interconnected, and that's kind of what we wanted to do. We kind of wanted to bring both worlds a little bit into like the metal and then a little bit of the fusion kind of style, and that's kind of how it started with on the first album. I wouldn't say that the fusion side of it is really audible in any to any big degree at this point, but it certainly was like an important thing for us back then. But I mean, even today, if you like the bands and the drummers, like you take someone like Danny Carey of Tool, I think he's absolutely amazing. He's a musician. He does something with that band that is so unique. And Bron Daler of Mastodon, amazing. Also a very unique kind of style drummer, and also very good singer, obviously. Gojira, another band that I really love. Great drumming. And Gene Hoglan, it's forever going to be one of my favorite metal drummers of all time. Absolutely. Him and Sean Reinert, you know, rest in peace, Sean. They really had an impact. I think Sean Reinert with the Cynic album, Focus, that came out in '93, for probably from like halfway from '93 into halfway between '94 and '95. That was the only album pretty much I listened to. That's how much I loved that album with Cynic and Sean Reinert on drums. And he had really kind of perfected that in between of metal. He had really like fast double kicks, and his handwork was more kind of a fusion style. So he was someone I definitely looked up to, and Gene Hoglan pretty much for the same reasons, you know, at that point. So yeah, those are some of the drummers that I think had an impact in different regards, and maybe audible in my playing or not, but yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay, we have a question from Mark Zapata, and he asks, please speak of your relationship with rudiments and how much do you use them in your writing?
Well,
do you
I really don't have a relationship to rudiments, to be honest.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
that the rudiments, that's what those teachers were trying to teach me, and I just kept bailing on them. So I mean, I'd be hard pressed to even like tell you what rudiments are, basically. And I mean, a paradiddle, it's like, okay, yeah, of course, paradiddles can be used in very efficient ways. And I'm pretty sure I do, and I have done a bunch of times. I use something that is not the regular, the first like paradiddle that you learn, but something that sounds like a paradiddle, like in just how you kind of playing the kit. So I'm sure it's in there in different ways and shapes, but next question. I mean, me and rudiments, I don't know. It's just like there's no relationship. I don't really have a relationship to rudiments, even though I should, I guess, you know.
Okay. All right. So yeah. So this is. Oh, okay. Now, so I mean, I want to ask you this question, or maybe some people would like what we've read in some of the comments when Meshuggah put up this announcement that you are a judge at Drum of Global, right? So I want to ask you what sort of made you agree to be a judge for Drum of Global?
I don't know, man. I mean, I've done a couple of things as far as being a judge. This little thing down in Sweden they did a few years back when me and Morgan Ågren and Peter Wilder, um, we went down there and kind of judged this competition. And but I mean, it wasn't a big thing. It was just kind of, it's a national thing, but they just do it for fun. So it's not really serious. And the level is from complete beginner to kind of pro, you know? So there's not like, it's not like all drummers are great, but in different ways. Some are really like just kind of starting out and they just love it, you know, I just want to go up on a stage and hammer away, you know? So, I mean, I do appreciate that. And I do like watching drummers, like, because there's as many, you know, drumming styles as there are drummers, basically. So I just think, you know, it's, first of all, drummers are kind of a community that is different, to me at least, looking into, like, from the outside looking into guitarists or bassists or other musicians. I don't know. To me, drumming community is kind of a little bit special. It's a little bit different, and I mean, who doesn't enjoy watching drummers? You know, it's not something that I was never a big, like, I didn't have all the DVDs with all the courses and all that stuff, but I kind of always like more the drummer that just came out and just like blow your mind, you know, and more than maybe the ones that are kind of trying to teach you something, you know.
Yeah.
So, I mean, of course, I matured, and I would love to be taught something as well at this point, and not just like, it's not just about like wowing people or doing something that's so crazy that, you know, no one else can do this. This is at 400 BPMs. I'm playing this bass drums. It sounds like a note, like, like I'm not looking for that, obviously, but it's just interesting to see like people's different approaches, and it's not about who's got the best chops or who's got the fastest hands or the best technique. And sometimes it's just about like someone like just writes like oh, that's a nice way to build a solo, and it doesn't have to be advanced. It can be just someone just playing toms softly with mallets. It doesn't have to be a specific thing, but yeah, I do enjoy it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I was telling you earlier that I personally feel like when we organize the drum off, obviously it's not about who's the fastest, who's the most technical, you know, but in essence, we feel that it's very similar to, it's more similar to what you have been doing, you know, and I'll use these words that I think you as a drummer and the people that join Drum Off Global is like, it's like you guys are the best of being original, and you try to be musical in your playing, and there's also complex, right? I mean, a drum solo often feel like it's complex, right? I mean, it's not going to be like to that throughout the whole song, right? So and yet it is still anchored by finesse, you know, and also with groove, you know. So that, I think, in essence, I feel that's where it meets, you know, like a drummer like you and all the drummers that take part in Drum Off Global. It's a challenge, you know. It's like people find it a challenge to play your stuff, obviously, you know. And now the comments are building up because they were shocked that you have nothing to say about rudiments. So and so at the same time, when people look at the drummers from Drum Off, I mean, they're going to feel that it's very complex, you know. And some would say that playing a drum solo is self-indulgent, you know. I mean, obviously we beg to differ, because, you know, it's like saying you come up with a part just to make people feel that it's sick, you know. I mean, and that's what people are saying, you know. But obviously you didn't do that. You did it because of the music, right? You did it because of the song that you were writing, you know. you didn't start out writing a song and make it sick so that you could impress people, right? So
Yeah, no, yeah, of course not.
yeah, so similarly for the solo, it's like a sound, you know, coming out from the drummer, you know, and in Drum of Global we only do drum solos. We don't play along to songs, so we don't have to have the hard time judging someone playing to a Bruno Mars song and a Meshuggah song.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't make sense because at the same time, you want to bring people together and you want them to show what they like and how they sound. But there's only so many ways to do that in a format that makes sense. And to do that in a short drum solo is actually a very good way of doing that. Because how are we going to judge someone playing along to Eagles? You know,
Yeah.
it's you know, how long are we going to listen to him before we come to any kind of conclusion what we think about his drumming? An hour or 2 hours? Or so I think, I mean, the drum solo, yeah, but then again, a drum solo can be many things, and it can be,
Yeah.
some people I've seen drum solos that are just musical, and that has no, like, it's not about, you know, chops or anything like that at all. It can be anything. It can be all about chops. It can be all about, you know, just making a drum sound a certain way. It doesn't have to be anything particular. It can just be a single groove for 3 minutes, you know. If you play that really, really, really well, it's like, I tip the hat, because that's hard. A lot of times that's way harder to do than to just like wail and just kind of go nuts on the kid. It's at least for me personally, I find it way harder to, if you're going to impress someone with just playing a groove, you got to know what you're doing, man. That's not easy. That's not easy. That's not easy.
Yeah. And Dylan from Australia, and I think in Australia now it's 3 a.m. so
Wow,
he asked you
that's
a
good.
question. I think he said, what do you, if you were to write a drum solo, what do you think are the important elements to a good drum solo?
I wouldn't really know.
Yeah.
To be fully honest, I mean, I never tried to write a good drum solo that has like a beginning, a middle part, and the end, and whatever. I never tried, and I really kind of suck at that. I mean, if you look at like the greats, if you look at, you know, I'll bring up Neil Peart again. His written solos, you know, he did this like one solo, he did it for like 10 years, and then he changed it, and everyone was like, Neil Peart made a new drum solo. And then he like played that drum solo for 15 years, you know. It's like, but it's awesome because it's very meticulously kind of thought through. And I think it was him that had that video called like The Anatomy of a Drum Solo, like, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think I should have probably watched it, but I never watched it. So I don't know. I never really tried, and certainly with the type of music and the kind of intensity level of drumming in our band, of course, we're never going to do a drum solo live. You know, it doesn't make any kind of sense.
Yeah.
You just turn off the guitars and everything else and the vocals for one song, and then turn it back on, and then that's kind of a drum solo you had there for 7 minutes. Yeah. I'm trying to answer this question as good as I can, but I am not the person to ask about a drum solo. I really don't know how to. I have never performed or written or tried to perform a well-written drum solo. I never have. So,
but you know what?
I would have to refer that to Neil Peart's The Anatomy of a Drum Solo. I'm sure you can find all you need there. You know.
But you actually did answer it in a certain way, because you said there should be a starting, a middle, and an ending.
Yeah. That much I know. That's pretty much like, that's kind of where I'm at. That's my level of expertise in this area. It's got to start obviously at some point.
Yeah.
there's got to be a middle part, which there obviously will be if it ends at some point, and it's bound to end at some point. So those three things are obviously going to have to be in there.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's possible to do it without it. I mean, how do you do a drum solo if you never start?
Yeah.
Or if you never stop either, you know?
It is actually a very good point, because we have seen so many drum solos, and some drum solos have no start, no middle, no end. So
Yeah, you just get kind of thrown into a blender, like,
yeah.
and then it stops, and it's like, what the hell?
So therefore, it takes. I mean, I'm pretty confident that if you were to write a drum solo, it'll be a great drum solo. It's just that at this level of your playing, you're not going to do that because it's not required at this moment, you know?
Yeah.
So, and so for anyone that sits down and write a drum solo, it's going to be, it's going to take a lot of discipline to do that. Similar for anyone, it's not just you, you know, for anyone. And that's why what we're doing is we're trying to encourage that, you know, like if we look around us, like you talk about Neil Peart, right? There are so many other guys like Dennis Chambers, you know, and guys like that. They have a solo in their head, you know, but when they play it live, they always throw things around, improvise their own solo on the spot. So I think with this kind of exercise, or this kind of, shall I say, this competition, it almost brings everybody into this focus that, you know, every drummer can try to have a solo in their head, you know, and wherever they are performing, you know, when it's called upon, they could use it. So if anything else, anyone that joins the competition will walk away with a solo that represents them. And I think that's what we want everyone to understand as well. You know, it's not about showing off, you know.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think to a certain degree, maybe I should try to write a solo, because actually what you're saying is like, it's probably a healthy thing for people to do, to explore it. I mean, the worst you can get out of it is you learn something. So either you learn something about drums, or you learn something about yourself. Maybe you learn that you don't have time for this. Maybe you learn that that you're not feeling it, but maybe you'll learn that you know, you're getting something out of it at the end of the day. So I think I'm sure it's a very good exercise for a drummer at any intermediate to pro, any level, you know. I'm sure, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So maybe Thomas, just at this point, you could just help us just encourage the people that are listening in and watching in, you know, try and encourage them to join and represent their country. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to all you guys that are joined here with us today, this is not about a competition. This is not about, look at what I can do, look at what, you know, how fast I can play, like Boone mentioned earlier. It's not about that. We're just trying to create something. Boone has been doing this for years now, and they're creating something and trying to just kind of bring everyone together. And I think this is a really cool thing. And you don't have to overthink it. I mean, I think for pretty much everyone, if you try it, maybe you're not used to recording yourself, but nowadays, like even with a phone, the surprisingly good sound quality and stuff, you don't need to have a pro studio to do this. You can just spoof around, and you can record as much as you want before you decide. So don't put up the phone and like freeze because, oh, I'm going to do this drum solo now. Obviously this takes a little bit of thought and planning, and like we said earlier, the anatomy of a drum solo. What do you want to do? Do you want to start soft? What are you going to go out, you know, like a crazy person, just hammer away? Do whatever you want. But at the end of the day, it's about having fun, and it's about connecting with other drummers and representing your country. And you told me, Boone, earlier that there's already interest from like 40 different countries for these kind of for this thing. Yeah. And that's amazing. That's amazing. So yeah, it's a really cool thing. And I think it'll be a good time. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So back to some more questions. Right. I think I saw some questions about writing. All right. This is from RJ. He says, does your writing of lyrics and drums play any factor in your playing?
I wouldn't really say so. I mean, I do write. Usually, I have like a period, and it's usually during the wintertime when I tend to kind of write more lyrics, and the I think usually for any given song, you have to adapt the lyrics. The lyrics are not written usually; they're written from here with kind of a pacing in mind, and almost like you would write a poem or something. And then you just try. The first thing is to try to, when you're writing a new album, you have music, you have different songs, but you don't have the lyrics. Then you try to match what's the vibe of this lyric? What's the vibe of the music? Do they match? That's the hardest part at first, to get something where the wording matches the kind of the, whatever it might be, the aggression level of the music. Like what kind of style of riffing is it? Is it very chuggy, or is it more like esoteric something, and how that ties in together with the lyrics, and obviously I think it's very crucial that those two kind of match for you to have a song that kind of makes any kind of sense, you know. I guess a little bit topic wise, but I think to a bigger degree, I think for us playing very aggressive music, it's a lot of times it's more than the wording. I guess it's more about the kind of the aggression level that comes out, what kind of language is used in these lyrics and whatever. But at this point, once you have that, you find, oh, this lyric actually, I think this would go really well with this piece of music. I always have to change their lyrics. I mean, it's no getting around that, because they're not written for a specific song, obviously. So a lot of times what happens, I have to take out a bunch of stuff from a lyric, or I have to add a bunch of stuff. So there's a little bit of like, sometimes it's hard to get back in kind of the mood or how you were thinking when you wrote these particular lyrics that you chose. So sometimes it's hard to kind of just go back and kind of change things around or add stuff, especially if you're not kind of in that, if the lyrics are very particular and they kind of, it takes a certain kind of mood for you to kind of get into it. But a lot of times it just kind of works itself out. You know, you just, a lot about the pacing, because if I write a lyric that's pre-written, you have a piece of music, you can pretty quickly see like, how do we want the lyrics like to be for this music, and you can pretty quickly see if these lines are these the lyrics are going to kind of line up with that or not. The third way is you can write something completely for the music, which is the most difficult way, because it's more difficult to make the lyric make complete sense to you, even though if to other people it might sound the same as any other lyric. But if you're not feeling it yourself, and what I'm trying to say is, if you have a piece of music that's very particular and you don't have anything lyrics wise that kind of goes with the vibe or the pacing or anything, you have to, sometimes I write lyrics specific and almost like down to the syllables, like what do I want, like what do I want the vocals to do here, and that's kind of hard sometimes, to kind of trying to write something meaningful, but you're at the same time you're extremely limited in trying to do that. So it's definitely a lot of work for us, you know, adding and adjusting and figuring out the lyrics to go with this music, because the last thing we want to do is make the lyrics, the vocals make this music sound more difficult. So the main goal, or the first goal, is to try to get the lyrics as much on the 4/4 as possible. But with this kind of music, you have to constantly adjust because there's so much going on. But in a good case, the lyrics really kind of promotes the groove that the song has. And we don't always succeed with that. But the older we get with each album, I think we do learn more and more, and we do get better at it. But it's definitely a big chunk of the work too. It's not only about, you know, whether the bass drums are going to play 3 or 4 hits. It's a lot of other kind of things that come into play for us, you know, writing this kind of music for sure. Thanks for the question, though. It was interesting.
Yeah. And Renato has been very curious about this. He says, I'm curious to know why you play double strokes at very slow tempos exclusively with your double bass pedal and not the single pedal. For example, like you would, he's trying to say, like, why do you play like single notes but with right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot? Yeah, so like in songs like Lethargical, Demure, and yeah, why do you prefer to play it that way? Is there a reason for that?
Well, sometimes it's about the pacing, and if you take like Demiurge, for example, it's definitely a little on the fast side to be playing some of that stuff with one foot. It's just like it's not quite that fast, but it's a little fast for a single. But it's actually this kind of ties back to what we were talking about earlier, Boom, with my back injury. So I have that's still a problem that's still kind of remains, even though it got better over the years, that I kind of lost control of my right foot. Is that sometimes it's very hard for me to pace certain strokes, like certain tempos are very hard for me after this back thing happened. So I go, that's one of the reasons why I use the right and left kick, even though it's kind of slow enough for me to be using just the one kick. A lot of times, if you take a song like Rational Gaze off of Nothing album, I guess, it's like that's another like one that's like, yeah, you can play it with one, but it makes it so much like it puts more emphasis on the second hit or both hits rather than, at least for me and my type of technique, it wouldn't sound like to ga-gung. It would sound like ga-gung. It would, like, the first hit would be softer. That's kind of just how I always play. I've seen drummers where the first hit is harder that play like ga-gung. But for me, it would be like ga-gung. And I don't want that. I want it to sound like ga-gung, like 2 equal hits. So a lot of times, and even for this new stuff that we're writing for the new album, I have to kind of resort to that sometimes out of the necessity, because my that nerve injury won't let me play certain things. Kind of my foot just kind of does all weird things, and sometimes it's just because I want the emphasis. I want it to sound like that. It makes a specific sound rather than the sound of a single kick kind of playing on the fast side of things.
Yeah. All right. Hope you have answered Renato. He kept asking that question. All right. Now this question, this is from, yeah, I want to make sure you answer this. He says he would like to know about your relationship with Buddhism, and do you practice anything related to meditation, like yoga, etc.? Do you do that?
No, I don't. I don't. I mean, my only relationship to Buddhism is that my spouse is a devout Buddhist, and she's been doing that for many years, for over 20 years. But so, I mean, she's taught me some stuff about it. I've learned just from being around her over the years a little bit of how different things work and what she's interested in, how she meditates, a little bit of stuff like that. But I don't practice it myself. I don't really do any of that stuff. I don't do yoga. I don't practice any religion. I would say to me, not to go too far into this because we're talking about drums, but to me, I have a kind of an aversion to the monotheistic kind of religious. You know, I don't kind of like the ritualistic aspects of it. I don't like how some of them think. I think Buddhism is something very different. It's definitely not. I wouldn't put it up there with the monotheistic religions because it's not. It's definitely something different. It's more about how you want to live your life and what you want to kind of, how do you make yourself happy? How do you make yourself know things? How do you try the pursuit of trying to be enlightened, I guess. So to me that's different, but we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, great, thank you. And this question is from Gil, and he says, was there an experience something that you're most grateful for and you have the chance to give thanks for the music and the drumming that you do? Was there ever an experience?
I'm not 100% sure I understand the question.
Yeah, because
it's
like, was there ever an experience that you're most grateful for, that you have the chance to like play music and things like that? Was there any kind of experience in this 30 years, something that changed your perspective, other than the music stuff,
Yeah.
Not,
I'm trying to think of something. I don't think so. I don't have like that one like a moment of epiphany or anything, or a certain thing that happened that like did something extremely good for me as a musician, or that was a main like kind of a page turner, or that was something that really changed everything. I have a hard time thinking of like any specific moment in that regard. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem. Yeah. Okay, and this question from Dan, he said, I thought it would be cool if you might discuss how you approached learning to play these complicated polyrhythmic drum parts when you first joined the band and had to figure out a new and much more difficult way of approaching drum beats. What sort of things got you over the uncomfortable part of playing these sort of drum patterns and the limb independence involved? Like, do you need technology to slow the program parts down to help you figure out how the limb movements will relate to each other at that time? Or was it some other way you figured out how to wrap your head around it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's different now, obviously, than it was early on. And also nowadays you have all these, we program everything and like Cubase and whatever, and use, tune track stuff like Superior Drummer and that stuff. So we program the drums. We don't really go into a studio anymore to record demos because we can make the demos right in the computer by programming drums. So obviously that is a very helpful tool for me nowadays when learning a song, because I can just go in and make it whatever speed I want. Not only that, I can go in to the drum app and look what I actually put in there, even if it was a year ago, and you listen to it, it's like, what was I thinking here? And then I can try to kind of figure it out that way. So nowadays you have all these helpful tools in that regard. Earlier on, it was different. Obviously, I don't even really like remember, but I mean, for sure, and this goes today too, before I ever attempt to play anything on the drum set, I listen to it, listen, and until pretty much every little syncopation and every little kind of thing is like in my head already before I even attempt to play. Because with this style of music, and then playing to a click track, and usually even from the get-go when we start rehearsing any new material, you have to have a certain level of, you have to really kind of know the song really well, and that comes down even to me sitting at a computer and actually start by playing on my hands, my feet, because sometimes not playing on my hands and my feet. I will play on my legs with my hands, and I will obviously play my feet on the ground just to kind of figure out how it feels for my body to do it. Because it's all kind of a matter of balance, and it's a matter of sticking. There's some of the songs that we do where you have to kind of switch out the left, if you're playing a kind of a backbeat with your left hand on the snare. All of a sudden you're kind of going into something else, what makes you, so every like third hit you have to hit it with the right hand instead, or you have like stuff like that going on. So it's usually obviously not very straightforward. It depends on the songs. We have songs for sure. Someone mentioned Lethargica or Demiurge that are more kind of slower paced, more straightforward, that has the drumming is not as hard or as intricate, I guess, but for some songs there's really a lot that goes into kind of figuring out sticking and stuff like that, and also just to kind of feel like, does this even feel like, can I ever learn to play this? Because sometimes you can kind of get lost in this like programming and stuff, and it makes it sound so effortless, and you don't really pay much attention to it. Oh, it sounds great, shouldn't be too hard. And then once you, like maybe a year or two later, you're trying to finish up the album or whatever, and you try to play this, and you're just like, what how was I like, it's not in your body. That's kind of how I usually say it. It's like sometimes there would be stuff there, it's like, I don't have this in my body, I have to really like try to pull this out of me, you know. I try to create this from scratch in a sense, and of course when the times when you kind of feel like you have to do that, it's going to definitely be a challenge, you know. I will say this though, even though that sounds kind of tedious, and sometimes it can be tedious and challenging. Has challenging. The word challenging has kind of good connotations, kind of maybe not good connotations in some ways, because challenging also means that you have to work on something maybe more, and maybe, you know, really kind of figure out, or maybe you have to figure out a different way to play this than you initially thought. Like for example, like we mentioned, like instead of playing this stuff on the one kick because you really want to hear that hi-hat 8 notes going, maybe you have to skip the hi-hat, and maybe you have to do it on 2 kicks and stuff like that. So there's always like things like that are kind of challenging, and luckily it's not for every song on an album, but usually there are a few of them on each album that kind of, you have to really kind of work at it. It's not like we've done this so long now that it doesn't matter, you know, they can just do anything. We can just take this part and just play it and just, you know, mess around with it and kind of on a whim, or just like any way we feel like. But that's not the case, and certainly not for my drumming. And even though the style of drumming that we have in this band is very kind of sounds kind of free, sometimes it can sound kind of free form in some songs, like you're really kind of just jazzing along, but it's very meticulous every single hit, and I don't really even change like fills or anything. It's very like, I have to play it like it's mapped out, and it's once you kind of have it down, you just stick with that. You just try to stick to it as hard as you can. Yeah. I don't know if that answered anything. Yes, I think I tend to digress, and I'm sure I did again.
Okay.
But yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. One more technical question from Matt Vaughan. He said, I was wondering how the composition for Clockwork specifically came about. Did the drum patterns come first, and then you wrote the riff to the drums or vice versa?
Yeah, actually, that particular song started from drums, but only the very first part of the song, and then we kind of started writing riffs for the next part and the next part and the next, and built an actual piece of music out of it. But it started just like as a pattern that I kind of liked. It's like, oh, I dig this. This could be something, and I mean, to a certain degree, I would say that's pretty unique. And I wouldn't suggest it's a great way to write music, because it's still rock and roll music and some kind of, in its very base, you know, it is rock. And to start rock music with a drum beat rather than a riff is you know, for us it works sometimes. It doesn't always work, but sometimes we write music from that aspect and it works. But I think it only works because even the guitar work for our band is usually more percussive than it is melodic in a sense. And we do use the guitar. The guitar work on a lot of our stuff is extremely percussive. And that's like how this modus operandi, if you will, how that works for us. But I don't, it's not for every band, of course, like for every drummer to try to be that guy that comes into like, oh, look at this, I'm playing this, and now you're gonna write a riff for this, and not only that, but you got to make a great song out of it. So yeah. I don't know, it works for us sometimes, and sometimes, you know, sometimes it's better to kind of, let's start with a guitar like Elvis did. You know?
Yeah, but I mean, you can't put creativity in a box. I mean, simple, right?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I don't really practice drums. I have terrible, kind of practice regimen. I don't really play that much if I don't have to. And, but when I do, I just kind of spoof around on the kit, and I kind of do that just to kind of, sometimes you kind of find these like gold nuggets, like, oh, hold on, what did I do there? This sounded really cool. And you kind of base something out of that. And I at that point, I will just go to the computer and program it and just save it, and just kind of save it for later. And sometimes you forget about it, and sometimes you're like, oh, hold on, I had this really kind of cool thing that's kind of, let's pick that back up and see if we can do something with that. And that's kind of how Clockworks came around. It was just one of those things I used to play in my kit, kind of the general style of it, and then we kind of we made a song out of it, and it worked out. So
yeah. All right, so one last question before we end. I think it's amazing that you guys are in a band for 30 years, you know, and I think more than just music and making money. I think there must be something that that kept you guys together. So how would you describe these 30 years of Meshuggah for yourself?
I mean, first of all, and I think this is obviously crucial for any band to have any kind of longevity, you know, together, to be together. Very fortunate to be together for 30 years, and we really never even had any fights or anything in the band. So I would say for us, we're all friends. We're good friends. We're great friends. We love each other. We love hanging out. We really enjoy each other's company. And I'm not saying that it has to be like that. It could be any, you know, it can be certainly a few different ways how a band dynamic works, you know. But that's, I feel for us, that's kind of what helped us, you know, get to where we are today, is that we always try to, you know, treat each other as friends and be respectful to each other, and also, you know, talk about what we want with the band, what kind of, like, you know, philosophize about what you see yourself doing and what you're kind of trying to do, to at least try to have some kind of coherence as far as like where we're trying to go as a band, instead of like one person going this way and the other person trying to go that way and the third person trying to do something else. So that has worked for us. Not saying it has to be like that, but it's definitely helped us, you know.
Yeah, I think it's like the stars align for the whole band, I think, and you guys are united, and I think that's tough. I think for people that want to play music, you know, you need band members. So
Yeah, and that I
not
think that's a good finishing note too. I think for this is that I think to a certain degree, maybe people think that we were just that good or something, that we made this somehow like happen with our skill, which is not the case. This is like this is also very much about luck, about timing. Like when Destroy Erase Improve album came out, who were the people that heard it? It was producers of big record labels. It was like we were very lucky. Everything, like the timing was perfect for Destroy Erase Improve, for example. So this was like post where grunge took over everything and nothing else was really around other than like Pantera and then Metallica, like the huge ones. But other than the mega, like Metallica, grunge took over. You had Pantera, then you had kind of something, a revival of sorts that happened. You had Burn My Eyes with Machine Head came out in '95. You had the first Fear Factory album. Those things kind of happened. Our Destroy Erase Improve was kind of just in perfect time, so it had more of an impact for us as a band than it would if it just been released the year before that or the year after. It was a matter of timing and luck. And the same thing happened with the next album with Chaosphere, and it came out right in the perfect time for Slayer to take us out on tour in the US, which was kind of what opened up that market for us. So it's so much. I mean, there's probably millions of people that are playing in their parents' basements or in the garages and everywhere. They're amazing musicians that write amazing music. We all know this, but how do you get from there to doing something else? We haven't been the most industrious of people, for sure. When we were younger, we just believed in ourselves. The rest happened through luck. So it's not a matter of only like whether you can play this or that, or, you know, it's about luck and kind of timing as well. So we've been very fortunate, you know.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, the fact that you can, I think you said it like twice, you never fought, never fight, you know. I think that speaks of all the members in the band, you know, like you guys you have this understanding of unity, you know, agree to disagree, but never to go against the band.
Yeah, no, we have to have unity, and we have to be a unit, and for us to be on a stage and convince other people that what we are doing is impactful and meaningful. You know, we have to back that up with our emotions, our belief in ourselves as a group of people, and our belief in ourselves as a band and as an entity that's supposed to be on stage with pummeling lights and weird, you know, sounds and tell people this is some cool shit. So if you don't, you know, if you don't have that behind you, if you don't believe in it, if you don't have the friendship, if you don't have whatever it takes, it's not gonna come across like that, you know.
Yep. Yeah, it's amazing. I think lots of musicians need to hear that. So,
I think so.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Thomas. You know, everybody, thank you very much for staying with us. So hope that you enjoyed. I think Thomas spoke a lot tonight, so let's give it up for Thomas.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks to all you guys that tuned in and checked this out. And I know there was so many questions that are just like, I'm sorry, we really couldn't really. We had to choose a few of them, but it was I had a great time. So thanks, guys.
And remember to follow us at Meshuggah and also at Drum of Globals, right? So.